Hey there, I'm Lizzie Mash from themovingmama.com, where I teach parents all about gentle parenting, and today we're talking about toddler biting. So, what are you going to do about a toddler who bites? Because this is not a great behavior to have to deal with. If you've ever had a toddler just clench right into you, jaws locked, and it feels impossible to get their teeth out of you, then I can totally relate because I have been there and it is just not fun. And sometimes it is very irritating if it just keeps happening and you can feel really triggered because your little lovely child is hurting you very badly by biting you. So what are we going to do about this behavior? First of all, you might be wondering if toddler biting is normal. And sadly, yes, it is. It is normal. But the thing is, lots of times our toddlers are using biting to communicate something to us. They might be communicating to us that they are angry, or sometimes they're just communicating to us that they're being playful and they're doing it without realizing that they're hurting us. So toddler biting is definitely normal, but it is also possible to decrease how much our toddler is biting us or others. So we're just going to cover a couple different types of biting to explore whether those are also normal, because I know a lot of parents are curious about why their toddler is biting in a certain way. So is it normal for a toddler to bite themselves, like to bite their own hand? Yeah, that can be a little bit normal, but if they're doing it a lot, you might be concerned as to why they're doing it. So that's really the question, is why are they doing it? Are they teething? Do they have more teeth coming in? Then maybe they just need something else to chew on. Or if they're doing it a lot in a way to harm themselves, then you might be curious if that's a sign of autism. And biting in general might be considered a sign of autism, but it depends on how much your child is doing it and if it's in a reasonable amount. And honestly, I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you if your child specifically is biting because it's a sign of autism. So you should definitely talk to your doctor about that if you feel like it's a really serious issue. But you have to look at your toddler specifically and try to ask yourself, what is motivating them to bite in this moment? Because if it seems obvious that they are biting because they're angry, or they're biting because you're doing something to them that they don't like and they're trying to stop you or to stop another child, then that kind of makes sense. But if you have an older child who is biting a lot instead of communicating, then you might start to worry about it a bit more. So definitely just talk to your doctor about it if it's something you're concerned about, because they can see your child in person and assess that from there. So what about if your toddler is biting objects all the time? Is that normal? Yeah, that can be kind of normal if they just chew on stuff, because that's one way that they're exploring, is just feeling how things feel inside their mouth versus in their hands. Or again, could be from teething, or they just like the feeling of biting into a board book and the way their teeth sink in. I personally don't like having little toddler bite marks in all of the toddler books that we have, but sometimes that happens. But again, there are ways to prevent it just by redirecting them to something else and give them something appropriate that they can bite. What about toddler biting because they're excited? Yeah, that's kind of normal too. That can happen. They're having fun and they're playing with you and they bite you. But we just need to teach them other ways to play with us and have fun besides biting us. Okay, time for the nitty-gritty. How do we actually stop a toddler from biting? So first of all, as they're biting us, we want to gently remove them from biting us. This can be really hard. Like I said, sometimes your toddler is going to be locked into you and it is very difficult to get them off. But try to stay as calm as possible, because sometimes if we get really worked up, then it can make them bite even harder, or they start to feel upset and emotional inside as we're being emotional, and they bite even harder out of that frustration that they're starting to feel because they're getting it from our frustration. So try to stay as calm as possible and remove them from biting you. Sometimes I've had to tickle my daughter to kind of distract her, to be able to get my hand or whatever out of her mouth. And then from there, you just want to very calmly say that it really hurts me when you bite me. It hurts. You can show them maybe the mark on your hand where they bit you. It's not for the sake of making them feel really ashamed about biting you, but just so that they can understand what happens to a person when they bite them. And then you can redirect them to something that they can bite instead. So you can't bite me, but you can bite this, whatever it is you feel is acceptable in your home for your toddler to bite or to chew on. And if it's coming out of an emotional expression, if they are angry, then you also want to address the emotions that they're feeling, because their emotions are absolutely acceptable. It's just the way that they chose to express those emotions by biting you that wasn't appropriate or acceptable. So say they are angry about something. How can you validate those feelings of anger in a way that shows that those feelings were okay? It's just the biting that wasn't okay. So maybe you can validate their feelings by saying, wow, I can see that you are really angry right now because of whatever reason. And give them the words that they need to express what they're feeling. So you're identifying that feeling that they have inside of them that was anger. And you can say something like, you really wanted this and this and this, whether it be a certain thing they wanted that we didn't give them, or they wanted to do something that we didn't allow them to do. So validate that, yeah, this is what you wanted, but I wasn't able to give it to you because it wasn't safe for whatever reason. So you're just explaining to them what happened. Again, staying calm, but just explaining the situation to them so they can understand what happened. And also so they can understand that you understand what they were feeling, that you understand why they were upset. That means a lot to our child. And it might feel like, well, my toddler's really young. Do they really understand what I'm saying? A lot of times they can understand what you're saying, even if their language isn't able to express the same things back to you. And it's also really good practice for us as the parent to get used to validating their feelings, because we're going to be using that skill and technique for years to come with our child as they have big emotions. And we want to be able to make space for those emotions and validate those feelings. So your toddler is probably not going to learn overnight to stop biting. That's just probably not going to happen. But what we want to do is just to start to eliminate some of their opportunities to bite. So a lot of what I talked about already is just like educating our toddler about not biting, that biting hurts, what they are allowed to bite, other ways to express their emotions, that instead of biting me, you could have said no, so that they can learn alternatives to biting in those scenarios. And then also sometimes you just have to learn to avoid situations where your toddler is going to bite you, where if you see that they're going to bite you, to move away and just say, oh, I see you wanted to bite me, but biting hurts. So here's something else you can bite, or here's another way you can express to me what you were feeling. And so you just kind of have to work on that little by little, and that is going to help your toddler to stop biting. Now, there are techniques out there that some parents might tell you to do in terms of stopping your toddler from biting. But if there's any technique that says that after one day your toddler will stop biting, then that's probably more likely to be a punitive technique, which means punishing the child really harshly to the point where they're terrified to bite again because of the punishment they might receive. And since I'm all about gentle parenting, that's just not something I promote. And if you want to learn more about why I don't use punishments, check out some of the resources I have below, and that can explain to you why we don't use punishments. So ultimately, the goal with gentle parenting is that the child would learn to not do something. So instead of using fear and punishments to stop the behavior, we want them to learn to choose to do the right thing. So that's a much longer process, which is why with even the biting, we are educating our child. We are giving them other ways to express their emotions, and that takes time to really sink in. So it requires a lot of patience and understanding from us, and that can be the most challenging part about parenting overall. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, what do I do if my toddler is biting other toddlers, especially at daycare? What if you're getting reports from the daycare workers that your toddler is biting all the time? Well, I've been in lots of daycares before as I'm an early childhood educator, and I've seen that a lot of the biting that happens is because your toddler is just trying to communicate to another toddler, maybe someone took away something that they wanted to play with, or maybe that toddler has something they want to play with, so they go and bite them. And sometimes it can be from the environment being too crowded, not having enough toys to go around, or toddlers just not really understanding the concept of sharing yet, or how to communicate their needs. So you can talk to the daycare worker and ask, what was the scenario surrounding my toddler biting? Trying to understand, what can you teach your toddler to prevent that from happening? But also, a lot of it lies on the responsibility of the daycare and how they're monitoring things, how they're making sure there's enough toys for all the children, and that they should understand that it is developmentally normal for a toddler to bite another toddler, to communicate that I want that, or don't do that to me, or whatever it is they're trying to express. And so the daycare workers should be intervening in those sort of scenarios as well. So that's my advice for dealing with toddler tantrums. And just remember to stay patient and calm every step of the way, and you will start to see change. And especially if you can start to feel less frustrated, it will be so much easier to deal with the toddler biting overall. So keep working at it, stay patient, and I hope that this has helped and that you'll start to see less biting in your home.